I guess Carl's really the real intellectual force. Let's be real. He was my professor and really a great one. This morning what I thought I'd do is go through a couple of the concepts we reviewed yesterday. This, Geodesign, make the world a better place. I don't have anything as profound as Brand did about the Bill of Rights, but I do believe in this technology quite heavily. And again, reviewing what Tom said and Brand said, we're living in a time where our planet is changing, and it's changing rapidly. And the things I want to highlight are the technology advancement and the scientific discovery advancement that is going on in the context of things that sometimes seem gloom and doom. And as Brand pointed out in a little conversation, we have to look at the good stuff, not with our heads in the sand, but simply to show signs of life that we have a future. Because if you study it enough, you realize we're in bad shape. It doesn't look so good. But in my life, I've always thought that technology could matter. And the fact that so many of these individual pieces of technology are clustering together to create a platform is pretty good. What I think we need is knowledge, integration, in a form that we can really use it. And that's pretty much what this institution is designed to do. But technology is only a small part. Most of the themes that we've been talking about in the last day have dealt with values and methodology, context that the technology lives inside of. Nevertheless, technology, from my perspective, is a strong enabler. And so one contextual statement is that geography is our science. It's one of the things that allows us to integrate so much of the planet, creates understanding. And GIS is a technology that makes it come alive, provides a framework for methodologies like geodesign to actually appear. And these methodologies and the technologies kind of co-evolve. And technology, at least in my world, doesn't jump like we have an idea and then we right away bring it into being. Certainly not in the context of GIS. It's been kind of evolving with some of these ideas. But it is technology that focuses on integration. And that's one of our cornerstones. Integration of data, integration of people, integration of disciplines with a medium that's strong in the world of communication. I would assert, and probably somebody will say in the future, that this technology and its related science and mapping and visualization is a kind of dimension of language. Music is a language. Mathematics is a language. Why not this being a language? So I believe in that strongly. Bernie said it yesterday that in his 23 years, in my almost 50 years of playing with this technology, what I'm seeing is there's a huge shift that's going to happen last year, this year, next year. This shift is about creating GIS as a platform. We know what platforms are, sort of. Facebook, search, YouTube. They're platforms which are extendable, add-onable with apps or knowledge. They're participation technologies in this world. This is the last 50 years of platform, you might think of it, platform technologies, but they're not platforms, that we've used. Mainframes, mini computers, workstations, client-server, servers, web services. This new technology is a platform that I think is as widely, it's possible to think of it as widely, it's possible to think of it as spreading as widely as other social medias. It's resting in the cloud and it's device. That's the pattern, not client-server, cloud device. And maybe you would think of that as client-server, sort of it is, but it's radically different in many dimensions. I want to cover just a little bit of that this should have been a prelude to what Bernie showed the early patterns of that representing, but maybe it's better to show his stuff first. Who knows? There you go. GIS as a platform connects everything that we've done in the past, the desktop technologies, server technologies, into a kind of a cloud gateway that supports apps and devices openly. This potentially has the power of making the concepts of geography, the models, the analytics, not simply visualization, widely available to everyone. And this platform, when we look at it from an organizational perspective, like your organization, one university, one company, one of your customers' companies, it means that we can take what heretofore has been a specialist set of tools or methods and fan them out through easy-to-use apps or front ends to geographic knowledge. GIS professionals have a role there. They still create and author and build data sets or models or analytics, but they can put them into a context as easy to use as something like Google Maps or Bing Maps, where we could actually fly through, but also dip back in and reach the rich analytic and methods stuff that GIS is characterized with. And designers will certainly be part of that community. One of the constraints is often designers who have this liquid creative way of thinking don't want to get so much involved in the knowledge that has historically been required to really understand the GIS platform. Brand was saying that one of his lead designers at Applied Minds, he stole away from Disney years ago, still does everything in paper. He says, by the way, Brand is an amazing guy, isn't he? I mean, his lab, he has about 250 people in a lab in Burbank. It's like walking into technology Disneyland. It's just an amazing place. But yet, his chief designer, because the technology hasn't really been able to deal with it yet, does everything in pencil and paper. And then they take his stuff and they digitize it into, using other tools, into digital media for dissemination. This is a kind of transformation that I'm talking about here, and it's enabled by the technology. It's a transformation that will bring geographic knowledge to a much broader audience. And I've been testing this with our users. Shell Oil had about 400 of the GIS professionals. It now has about 7,000 users in this cloud environment. It's just, and that's all within the last 7.5 months. So those organizations who are beginning to use it are, oh, they can actually use it by knowledge workers, by managers, by executives. You know, the President of the United States now gets his daily brief on this kind of web map notion, linking together other forms of intelligence, all kinds of intelligence, and the Secretary of Interior in about 2 weeks will have the same experience, reaching back into all of his organizational bureaus where all the science people are, and that connection between normal people and the science community that has been building these geographic data layers is going to be very empowering. Bernie also talked about the idea of integration with enterprise technology like SharePoint or Microsoft Office. This is going to not only provide access to geographic information by these people, but also take their matricey spreadsheet analytic world and bring it into the space of geography in a very rich way. This kind of platform notion is leveraging many trends. In the GIS world, GISs are becoming more powerful, more 3D, more real-time. We'll see a little bit of that from Eric in a moment. Beginning to build in some tools for geodesign and becoming much easier through the apps world as opposed to traditional desktop. At the same time, we're learning how to measure everything with GPS and and UAVs and sensor technologies, sensor networks, and that's creating lots more data. This whole buzzword of big data isn't just happening. I mean, 10,000 observations a second in sensor networks needing to be visualized in real time is now a challenge and a problem that many agencies are actually facing in both the national security world, but also in science world. And it's affecting science. But also computing is keeping up. As Brand said yesterday, computing doesn't have the same rules as the world ecology, but Moore's law is still continuing on through virtualization, cloud computing, faster machines, new SaaS kinds of ways of accessing software and data sets. This is transformational. And all of this new vision of GIS as a platform is resting on top of this. And science itself is being, I think, affected by it and affecting how we think, more collaborative science. Anyway, you get the point. You can go on this diagram, but I think it is a way to bring it all together, and when you see it all together like this, it really suggests that we can actually reimagine what GIS will be in the future. It's not something that I exactly expected. It isn't naturally the evolution of what one has been building in our industry, but it is pretty dramatic. When we do this, it means that we can take traditional GIS like desktops and servers connected to the cloud and make that knowledge available pervasively through apps on devices. When we do this, it means that there's new user experiences. We shift from the traditional desktop tools, legends environment to slippy map, touch and feel, touch-oriented systems for user experiences. And not just in 2D, but as you'll see from Eric in a moment, also in the 3D space. This new cloud environment helps us in a much more easy way connect virtually every kind of data and geospatially reference it dynamically and not merge it all into one database where we have normalization, but link back and normalize things through something that Bernie called yesterday Webmaps. These are dynamic, linked objects that live in very teeny files. They're actually a specification that points back to live services or static databases that live across the web. So pay attention to this notion of web maps. What do you think of what is a web map? Is it just one of those maps in the web? No, this is almost like a data type. I don't want to call it that. It's kind of like a view. It's a view of data or services. It's always services based, and we can do interesting things with it. More about that in a moment. All I want to do is suggest that this is a more agile architecture and data type that we can bring data from many sources together and dynamically integrate them and analyze them and mash them up. This pattern changes things. It changes the discussion in organizations. The discussion historically has been we have to normalize our data, put it into a database of layers or information before we can really build integrated systems. This suggests that you don't. You share your web map, which is a meta file in a way that points back to raw data that we can interact with, and we can do that in seconds rather than a lot of work. So the stovepipes can connect in such a way that it enables collaboration much faster. More sharing, more holistic approaches are possible. Actually, the realization of many of the visions that the very early pioneers of computational geography and GIS had. Organizations are picking up on this. There's actually several thousand that have actually just embraced it. Bernie went through a few of those yesterday. Cities, states, national agencies, a lot of them in the US in something that's emerging called the Geospatial Platform. Also a lot of international whole countries like Indonesia India, and others. World Bank, as a kind of international organization, has also embraced it. So what is the magnitude of this embracing? Since June or thereabouts, there are now over 1 million maps that have been shared in this open cloud environment. And today, we'll make about 100 to 120 million maps or derivative maps from that, like those kind of transactions that Bernie was showing yesterday. So it's kind of like a little hockey stick of growth, and it has huge value. But primarily, so far, the platform has been all about visualization and mapping. But over the next 3 to 6 months, you'll see the realization of spatial analytics in the cloud, where we deal with combining these web map services in defined ways. This platform, my theory is, will open up our world. It'll open up the GIS world to everyone else. It'll open up the real world to everyone. And the enabling technology is what I've been talking about. We'll see it just a little bit more in a minute. I think the patterns of embracing this technology are different than anything I've ever experienced. In the past, it was doing, like Brand suggested, studies to understand the cost benefit, to then do the system designs to figure out how to bring it into institutions. This is very different. People, like with other social media environments, are reaching out and pulling it. They want it. So it's a different pattern entirely, a different culture. And I think it'll not only support the sharing more effectively and more rapidly, but I'll assert that it'll also be the platform for realizing designing. As we saw from some of the presentations yesterday, one of the big challenges for GIS and geodesign has been data collection. And you spend half of your money, 3/4 of your money organizing it, integrating it, bringing it together. Suppose that was all just available as a service. I could actually just dial tone into it and bring it into my design any place, anytime, anywhere, on any device. That changes the game. Changes the role of GIS because I can embed GIS into anything as well. It's an open platform. I can extend the platform, and that'll help us get there much faster. Content in this platform, as I said, is growing very rapidly. There are now base maps for the entire world. There's imagery for the entire world. Recently, we acquired all of the digital globe and GeoEye imagery. This little animation shows that. The landscape analyst demo that Bernie showed yesterday is actually hundreds of layers of information for the entire United States of landscape data. I mean, there are 29 core categories: vegetation data, soils data, geology data, slope data, elevation data, hydrographic data for the entire US. So that little solar sighting project that he had with arithmetic and logical weighted screening, oh man, for those in the academy, it means I can assign an exercise to find out the best place for national park acquisition for my students, and next day expect an answer. For the whole bloody US. It changes things. When all the data is actually there, there's 7,000 variables in Community Analyst, and they're largely North American and European. But by the end of the year, we expect to have level 3 demographics for the entire planet, and geocoding and place finding. Everything changes. It's available there as a platform. The architecture for this is relatively simple, and it's really pinging off of what Steve Jobs did with the iPhone. When you buy an iPhone, it's of course a telephone. It's also how I get my music from the iCloud with iMusic, and on and on. So it's part of a system. So GIS belongs to an open system. Part of it is online in the cloud, so I can use online processing or content that people share there. I can also put in my own servers. I can start up my own servers and serve into that environment. And then I have a plethora of apps that can be accessing that. Free apps, shared apps, visual apps, analytic apps, designing apps that can be accessed through all these devices, as well as the desktop. And over the next 3 or 4 years, the desktop transforms into a kind of device app with things like Windows 8 and so on. So that's it. And part of this system is open content, so people share their content, just like with Flickr, and they use each other's content, they use each other's models, they use each other's maps. That's basically all that Bernie talked about yesterday. Web maps are important to understand. This is a diagram of it. Along the bottom of the diagram shows distributed services. So there's a weather service coming in, Ben, you know, it's the weather of Wisconsin. It's cold and wretched out here. It's not. And it's dynamic. I can check in. It's georeferenced. Imagery has a service. So over the next 3 months, Digital Globe is taking their image pixels and turning them into services. So this is remarkable because as a satellite comes in, a few seconds later, it becomes a web service out that people can use. And their whole archive becomes available as dynamic and temporal services. And traffic as a service, as well as geology, vegetation, land use, all of it are distributed services that authoritative source organizations create and maintain and serve inside of cities, inside of states, inside of national organizations, inside the world. This living atlas, open, shared, accessible, is the concept. And web maps are a little specification that you plug into and make available to this individual set of services or mash-up services through any device with open APIs. So any software, any tool can access them. And like I said, they support visualization, yes, but they also support being able to edit it. When I edit a web map, I don't really edit that little teeny file. No, I edit directly back to the original service where they live, if I'm given permission. And crowdsourcing obviously fits into this. And also I can do analytics and query like Bernie was showing, and on and on. And these web maps, very teeny little files, as Eric will show in a moment, can also be 3D. So I can share a 3D web map. It's called a web scene, and spin it around. And he'll show some good examples of that in a minute. So, how do I author these things? That also got simplified. Instead of a time-consuming, IT-intensive thing, I simply make a map on my desktop, right-click, send it to the cloud, turns it into a service. In that service environment, it becomes labeled, the metadata is attached, and accessible by any device. So simplification is part of the deal here. And what I mean by any device is any device. Windows devices, iOS devices, Android devices, and others in the making. So inside of that, like I said, now it's primarily query, visualization, 2D, 3D, but in the next few months, these and hundreds of other analytics, raster analytic tools, will be able to be employed with these streaming services vector or web maps and expanded 3D capabilities. So we can much faster through these very simple, kind of front-end, front office apps, look at cityscapes, buildings, landscapes, edit in 3D, kind of like the 3D editors, and analyze in 3D, doing 3D viewsheds, 3D buffers, 3D relationship analysis. And also this is open. So open APIs so that it's extendable. Part of the concept of a platform is that everybody can play. Everybody can plug in services with anything. Everybody can build apps open source apps, vendor apps, whatever. And, or just be young developers who have no knowledge of GIS but want to embrace maps and put them in their apps. So maps for apps, cool. On anything. So this is a turning point for Esri. It's a turning point for our users because it involves them into a new kind of game. Of course they will continue doing their traditional work, facility management, land use planning, forest management, demographics, store siting, all of those sorts of things, important work. And they will open up in a kind of a fan through cloud much of their work to be shared. And that's what's giving me, I mean, the numbers on this are giving me real encouragement that we can spread out geography as a platform through this, GIS as a platform. Geodesign is an integral part of the engineering team's work now. They kind of struggle with, getting out the next release and adding new functionality, all these sorts of things. And there's huge competitive demands on their time. But as we evolve that, it's starting to settle into the engineering cycle. Oh, what about geodesign? And the way I'm thinking of it is geodesign is not just for the designers. No, geodesign is for foresters, for transportation analysts, for store retail siting locations, for everyone. It's a way of thinking. It's really a way of bringing science into the way people make spatial designs of all type. And it's going to be done, continue to be done as an individual craft. It'll be done by groups and communities. It'll be done ultimately on top of the platform technology, I think, by society at large. And I think that'll matter in a big way. I like that idea that technology and apps kind of co-evolve. This is one, for me, gives me the chills. And so there we are. Well, that's all I wanted to cover. Unfortunately, I would like to say, I'm going to turn it over to Bernie to actually show you the real stuff, but you can imagine that from your experience yesterday. What I am going to do is turn it over to Eric, who is going to show a whole world of 3D work that's been going on here and also in Switzerland with a technology known as City Engine. City Engine was originally acquired by us several years ago to be a way to enrich our 3D portfolio. What we didn't totally understand is that it would integrate in over time into our base platform in such a way that it would introduce design in ways that we had not imagined. So, Eric, you want to take it over and show it with your colleagues here? Thank you.